Hello, Your Honor. I am Mike Wissink. On December 3rd, 2019, Grant Fuhrman used our good relationship to his advantage and tricked me so that I would turn my back. When I did, he tried to kill me. After today, I'm hoping to turn my back on him forever. There is no doubt he wanted to and would have killed me. If he had succeeded, Becky would have lost me, and I would have lost spending a long life with the person I belong with. My parents would have buried their youngest child. My siblings would have buried their youngest brother. My children and stepchildren would have buried their dad. I would have never seen my children excel in their careers or my stepchildren grow and learn sports and music. I would have missed walking my daughter down the aisle, and I would have never seen my first grandchild who was born last summer. The only reason I am still here is because of my own actions and the actions of one brave teacher. There are so many victims from this incident. Me and my family, 1,800 students and their families, 200 school staff and their families, and Grant's own family, not to mention the entire community. We've heard from many of these victims that still suffer from this incident to this day, and will continue to do so moving forward. All Grant had to do was tell the truth and accept responsibility for what he did, and I would have helped him, but he is not capable of doing either. For 3+ years, all I heard were lies, excuses, manipulation, and personal assaults against me, which were more lies. The trial continued with more of the same: lies, excuses, manipulation, and assaults against me. This is exactly who Grant is. I'm thankful the jury saw through all this, and I'm hoping you do as well. Grant cannot and will never accept responsibility for what he did. Not once during the last 3+ years has he accepted responsibility, nor have I heard any type of apology for what he did. What Grant did has changed me physically and mentally for the rest of my life, and not for the better. I lost a career I loved and was not ready to leave. 7 surgeries and a year of physical therapy. I will never have full use of my arm or hand. I had to relearn and still struggle with simple tasks like tying my shoes and buttoning my shirts. Things I have done my whole life and love to do are now a struggle, and some of them are impossible, like setting up my camping tent, hanging a deer stand, holding a fishing pole properly, or holding a screw while working on woodworking projects, and many more. I have continued mental health therapy and will forever have mental health issues. Certain sights, sounds, and smells will always create a strong negative reaction from me. I now hate crowds, movement, and people behind me. I continue to have bouts of unexplained depression. I will always suffer from symptoms from PTSD, which I've been diagnosed with and continue to seek counseling for. For the last 3+ years, I've heard nothing but lies, excuses, manipulation, and intimidation. I have heard comments such as, "We can't wait for the truth to come out. It was suicide by cop. It was the meds. The bite caused my injuries. Officer Wissink was poked. Officer Wissink wasn't even stabbed. It was a joke." Many comments about me going to the gym. Insinuations that I am some hulking weightlifter. Someone actually followed me to the gym almost daily. I was referred to as bleeding like a stuck pig and a cripple. Lies about how many shots were fired and how those shots occurred. Jurors were harassed, and my life was threatened, and many more lies, excuses, and manipulations. What we never heard after December 3rd was the truth and an apology. The truth lies on December 3rd, 2019. The truth is in Grant's actions and words from that day. Some of his own words and actions are as follows. He planned to take my gun. He thought about how to stab me in the neck and take my gun. He selected his weapon and drove 10 minutes to get to school and concealed that weapon. He walked past my office several times. I was initially with a staff member, but he wanted me to be alone, so he waited until I was. Finally, after finding me alone in my office, he came in. He did not want me facing him, so he asked me to look something up on my computer, knowing I would turn my back. He stood behind my chair, knowing he would be behind me. He stood close enough to put his hand on my chair. He didn't want me to see it coming and wanted me facing away from him. He pulled his weapon out of his pants and stabbed me in the neck and kept going and going. He didn't think I would fight back, but thought I would pass out or bleed out within a couple seconds. He wanted my gun. He drew an accurate diagram of my office and what happened. He stabbed me multiple times, including in the neck, the chin, near my eye, through my ear, on my shoulder, and multiple times on top of my head. Those are his words and actions on December 3rd. Those are not the words and actions of someone wanting to die by suicide by cop. This was going to be a murderous rampage. This was a well thought out, well planned attack in which he used our good relationship to take advantage of me. Grant said it was nothing personal and that he liked me. I believe those things, which makes this so much worse and shows who he really is. He is willing to manipulate and kill someone he admittedly likes to get what he wants. The only remaining question is, what was he going to do with my gun? Who else was he going to kill that day? Was he going to kill his on-again, off-again girlfriend who just happened to be on hall duty just feet away? Was he going to kill other people in front of her? This was no type of suicide. If he had his way, I would have been dead and he would have my gun and 46 bullets. Would you like to hear what 46 gunshots sound like? You can Google it. Lies, excuses, and manipulation. I'm willing to bet you hear more of that today. The jury wasn't fooled, and I hope you're not either. Your Honor, I ask that you sentence Grant Fuhrman to the max. It's what he deserves. He knew then, and he knows now, he could have walked into my office and asked for help, and I would have given it to him. Right up to the last moment, he knew he could have put his weapon on my desk and asked for help, and I would have helped him. The defendant had many opportunities to change his outcome, and it was his choice not to do so. He was willing to manipulate and kill someone he liked to get what he wanted. If sentenced to the max, he will still get out at about the same age I am now. If he chooses to do so, he can still live a good life, which is way more than he wanted to give me. Your Honor, I want you to know that after Becky reads her statement, we will be leaving. It was important for me to be here and talk to you, but for my own well-being, I cannot sit and listen to the defense lies and manipulation any longer. I spent 3 years listening to excuses, and I don't have it in me to listen to anymore.
And Mr. Fuhrman, is there anything you wish to say before I impose sentence today?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would like to apologize, not just to one person, but to many. Firstly, Mike Wissink, I'm sorry for everything I've done to you, all the pain I have caused you, not just physically, but mentally as well. And on December 3rd, your whole life was changed because of my actions. It's been very hard for me and my family, and I can't even imagine what you and your family had to go through because of this as the victims. You were always a positive, happy guy when I would talk to you or see you in the halls. Then I came out of the blue and changed your whole life around, and I'm sorry for that. What I did has deeply affected you, and I wish more than anything to take that pain away. As much as I wish I could, I can't take back what I've done, but I can do my best to try and make things right. I really hope that at some point you can forgive me and let me try to make things right with you, but I can completely understand if it takes you time to do so, or if you will never be able to. But please know that from the bottom of my heart, I truly am sorry. I'd like to say sorry to all the students and staff that were at the school that day. School's supposed to be a safe and fun learning place, but on December 3rd, there was a lot of chaos that was caused due to me. My actions affected a lot of people who are supposed to feel safe at school. I deeply regret that students were afraid because of my actions. That was never my intent. I'd like to say sorry to the parents of the students at the school. I can only imagine how scary it was to hear that there had been a school shooting where your kid was at and not knowing if they were okay or not. When you send your kid to school, you expect them to be safe. But on that day, everything changed, and I'm sure it was very hard for you because I know it was very hard for my mom, and I'm truly sorry you had to experience that. To all the first responders that showed up on scene or that were in the hospital treating Mr. Wissink and me, I apologize for all the chaos. I know that all your jobs are a very stressful job, and I'm sorry for adding on to that. To everyone in this courtroom, I'm sorry that my actions brought you here today. What I've done affected many lives. Everything that happened on or since that day, December 3rd, rooted from the actions that I took, and I feel terrible for how my actions affected you. I'm so sorry to everyone for everything. I would like to say thank you to the judge for always doing your best to be fair with me in a difficult situation. Things have not always gone my way with the motions, but you will always give me an explanation why, and it's always done in a way I understand. This has been a very long case, and I'm sure it has been stressful. I'm sorry for that and thankful you have always been patient with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I would like to say thank you to Officer Brett Robertson, who on December 3rd, through a very chaotic scene, sat by my side and gave me comfort. You are truly a respectable officer and a hero to me. Thank you. I would like to say thank you to the ones in the community who have shown sympathy and understanding what happened and gave me and my family support. It really means a lot, and for that, thank you. I would like to say thank you to my family who have shown endless support and been with me every step of the way, staying by my side, standing up for me, and knowing the person I truly am and what my intentions were that day. I couldn't ask for a better support team. Thank you. I know that on February 3rd, in this courtroom, I was convicted of attempted first-degree intentional homicide, but my intention was set on suicide, not homicide. At the time, I had a lot of negative things that were going on in my life that I didn't know how to deal with. I was on my medication that kept me up all night, overthinking and very depressed. I had a girl that for the first time ever, I tried to put my love into. While all these negative things were going on in my life, I turned to her for support, but she only pushed me away. What we had was extremely toxic, but I didn't know what to do. This was the first time I ever put my love into someone, and I was trying my hardest to make it work. I put all my love into her, and when things ended the night before December 3rd, I felt devastated. I felt like I had lost everything, and I didn't know what to do. On that night, I decided I wanted to end all my pain, that I didn't want to live anymore. So my mind decided on suicide. At the time, I was not at all my normal self, and I was not thinking right. I could only think about ending my own life. I was in a very unstable frame of mind, and only think about suicide for myself. Everything was like a blur, as if I wasn't in my own mind or in my own body. I'm deeply sorry to all the people I have dragged into this. I know what I did was not right at all, and it was very serious. I feel so horrible for all the pain that I've caused. What I did, I can never change, and I have to live with that every day. I want so badly to make things right and to show everyone that I'm not a bad person or some killer. I've made mistakes in my life and done things I wish I never would have, but I learned from every experience and changed drastically as a person. When I get out, I know that I will never return. I've taken this experience and grown from an emotional, immature 16-year-old kid into a mature, respectful, ambitious young man. I know that if I was let out on probation today for the rest of my life and got let out, that I would never be back to a jail cell again. I really want to prove myself to everyone and make things right. I want to show that on the outside, I have good intentions and I'm a good person. Your Honor, I'm not a bad person, and I'm not a killer. I've spent half my teenage years in a cell away from my family, and I've been punished. I've grown into a positive young man who has a good outlook on life. Every day, I've thought about what I've done and how my actions changed many lives, but I can't change what I've done. I can, however, stay positive, get out and try to make things right and show you that I'm not a bad person. I ask that you please give me the opportunity and promise that you won't regret it. Thank you for your consideration.
As indicated in sentencing a defendant, the court is to consider nature, seriousness of the offense, characteristics of the defendant, and the needs to protect the interests of the public. Those are the three primary sentencing factors that courts are to look at in criminal sentencing. Within each of those factors, there are many sub-factors that may be important in a particular case. In this case, I did have an opportunity to review the file, review the PSI, review the letters that have been received, review the defense materials that were provided. I've presided at various motion hearings, presided at the trial, heard the recommendations, testimony, statements made today. So it is a situation where I've been provided with a fairly significant amount of information that in many criminal cases I'm not provided with. Most cases don't go to trial, so I don't hear the testimony and evidence that happens at trial. Most cases don't have a PSI, so I'm not afforded the information that's provided in that document. In many cases, victims and family members of the defendant don't provide any type of information. So in this case, certainly the court has had a lot of information provided, and it becomes incumbent upon me to evaluate that information, determine what is appropriate for purposes of sentencing, and then to weigh that appropriate information in determining a fair sentence in this particular case. It isn't my intent to editorialize, it isn't my intent to speculate, it is my intent to take the information that I have received that is appropriate for sentencing purposes and try to determine what a fair sentence is in this case. There are some facts, I think, that are undisputed, that all parties agreed that were established. Those include that the defendant was 16 years of age, close to being 17, on December 3rd, 2019, the date of the incident. That he was a student at Oshkosh West in his junior year, that he had some needs by way of behavioral IEP through the school district, and had those for a number of years, that he had been on some medication for his ADHD, that he took a fork, a cooking type of fork, maybe referenced as a barbecue type fork, to school with him that day, that he had that item concealed, that he had it with him during first hour when he was in class, that between the first and second hour that he did walk in the hallways, going by Officer Wissink's office on a number of occasions, that he did eventually go into Officer Wissink's office. I think it's fair to say that it's a relatively small office, that he did ask Officer Wissink to look up a case that he had, that Officer Wissink was doing that on the computer, and that the defendant did utilize the fork to contact Officer Wissink, and that as a result of that, a fight broke out. Physical disturbance, whatever term you want to use, but there certainly was a relatively brief in time, but what appears to be an intense fight between the defendant and Officer Wissink in this small office of Officer Wissink's. At some point, Officer Wissink discharged his firearm 3 occasions. Officer Wissink struck his own wrist hand area. He struck the defendant's chest area. The officer had various injuries in addition to his hand-wrist injury from the discharge of the firearm in his head and neck area. The defendant had an injury in his chest area from the discharge of the firearm. So I think that is what we know has been established through the testimony and evidence and information provided as to what took place during that particular day and leading up to that particular day. So when I look at the seriousness of this offense, the jury found him guilty of attempted first-degree intentional homicide. That is a felony. It does carry with it significant incarceration, 60 years total, 40-year potential for initial confinement. So the legislature has determined that this is a very serious offense. The legislature has, though, allowed judges a very significant degree of discretion in these types of cases when it comes to sentencing. There is no mandatory or permissive minimum attached to this type of offense. So the court has the ability to go from the very small or minimal sentence all the way to the statutory maximum that is permissive, for this type of offense. When I look at the factors, I do look for what can be construed as aggravating factors and what can be construed as mitigating factors in a particular case. In this case, as it relates to the seriousness of the offense, there are a number of aggravating factors. Those include that this did take place within the school setting, where there is a substantial amount of individuals present in a fairly close proximity. Estimates here of in excess of 1,700 individuals in that school setting. The defendant did bring a weapon. Could he have brought a more lethal weapon with him? Potentially. But the weapon that he did choose was the type that could kill somebody. The defendant had planned this event. There's some dispute about how well thought out of a plan he had. But there was some planning that took place. He did want to be alone with Officer Wissink in this room. He did want Officer Wissink to, in essence, turn his back on the defendant. He did proceed to utilize the weapon against Officer Wissink. He did, I believe, actively resist during the altercation that did ensue in this office. So I think there are a number of different aggravating factors that are present in this case as it relates to the nature and seriousness of this offense. As to the second factor, the characteristics of the defendant, he is still young, very young when he committed this offense, under the age of 17. He had no adult criminal conviction history. He had a juvenile adjudication for criminal damage to property that he was on supervision for at the time of this offense. That was his only juvenile adjudication. He did have some other referrals from law enforcement, but no adjudications. He did have some behavioral issues in the school setting. He did have some actions within the school setting that caused him to be suspended. His behavior in school was inappropriate at times. was threatening at times. He did show some responsibility in some areas of his life. He was employed at the time of this incident. He had other employment previous. He did participate in positive activities, scouting and sports, religion. He did experience early childhood trauma, the death of his father. He does have a supportive family. The PSI does indicate that by his own accounts, he has used substances, consuming alcohol at the age of 15, consuming marijuana at the age of 14 or 15, indicating that he would smoke it daily, that he did experiment with other drugs. There is, as has been indicated, an early diagnosis of ADHD. He has been on medication for that during a significant portion of his life. He has experienced some side effects as a result of that medication. One of the hardest areas that a court is asked to evaluate in sentencing a defendant is remorse and empathy. But yet I think those may be some of the most important factors the court is to try to ascertain. They are, for the most part, subjective in nature. Many times I experience individuals, defendants at sentencing who express remorse. I've seen what sometimes we refer to as crocodile tears at sentencing. I've had defendants who I just don't believe at all are remorseful. I've had defendants that I think are remorseful because they got caught and not remorseful for what they did. I do think that Mr. Fuhrman has remorse for his activities, for his actions on December 3rd of 2019. I think it is above simply getting caught. I think he feels bad that he inflicted these injuries to Officer Wissink. He feels bad that he let himself down, his family down, school community down. I think he realizes the significance of his actions and how they have affected not only him, but others. As to the needs to protect the interests of the public, this is a case where the jury has determined that he committed this attempted first-degree intentional homicide. They determined that there was intent in this case. This is a case where the protections of the public are significant and substantial. He took a weapon to school. He used it against the police liaison or resource officer. It appears that his primary intent may have been to end his own life, but that is somewhat speculative. And even if it is so, would he have taken others' lives in the process of ending his own life? That's speculative. We don't know that. But we do know that the jury said that he was guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, attempted. And that is a danger to the public. As I indicated earlier, this is a school setting. It is a large number of individuals in a relatively small area. We unfortunately know of other school cases where individuals have gone in with weapons and caused a significant degree of carnage with students, teachers, and other individuals in a school setting. So I think this case does have a lot to do with the protections of the public. We've heard from psychiatrists who doesn't feel from a mental health standpoint that Grant is one who may do this type of offense again. We've heard that he has not been involved in altercations while incarcerated at the jail, although he has had conduct write-ups for a number of different violations of jail rules, which is not entirely uncommon, but is certainly concerning that he hasn't been able to conform his conduct and behavior to the requirements of a very structured correctional jail. The court's job in these cases is to look at those factors that are aggravating and mitigating factors, and try to structure a sentence that represents the minimum incarceration necessary. And as in most cases, there are factors that weigh both ways. Certainly the court has received letters, in this case, from community members both ways. I don't sentence based on those letters. They may at times provide me some information, but their recommendations as it relates to sentencing don't carry weight with the court, or any significant weight with the court. I think the protections of the public, the seriousness of this offense, do mandate that the defendant serve some time in the Wisconsin state prison system. I think to not incarcerate him would unduly depreciate the very seriousness of this offense and the rehabilitative needs of the defendant. And I think he does have rehabilitative needs that include not only mental health, but some counseling that he has at least somewhat undergone by way of taking an anger management class and some other classes and programs at the jail. And I applaud him for that. He has done well, has graduated from high school while incarcerated, has taken some other programming, has bettered himself by reading, which when it comes to most teenage males is foreign to their belief. But he has done that, and I think he has matured and grown up in jail. This certainly isn't a case where the maximum confinement is appropriate. There are mitigating factors sufficient to warrant something less than the maximum sentence. So that leaves the court with something in between. And in these cases, the court has to pick a number, so to speak, that fits those sentencing objectives and is the appropriate sentence. And sometimes that becomes a real challenge to courts because I often tell school groups when I talk to them about sentencing defendants that when I'm picking out a number of years, for instance, 1 year, 365 days, is a very lengthy period of time. And I challenge them to think about where they were a year ago. And when I sentence somebody, that each of those years that I add or pick out is another 365 days, not including leap year, that they will be taken from society. I have often also said that sentencing a defendant to any type of incarceration, especially prison, is not a day that I take any happiness or pleasure in doing. It's something I have to do, and but in some respects it's a failure of our society when we have to incarcerate individuals in our prison systems. But it needs to be done, and in this case the sentencing factors require that this court do so and look for what is the minimum amount of incarceration to meet those factors. And based on my weighing of those factors and the aggravating and mitigating factors that are present, I will impose 17 years of initial confinement in the Wisconsin State Prison System, followed by 10 years of extended supervision, that to be consecutive to any other previously imposed incarceration. There would be 1,246 days of credit against the initial confinement time. Conditions of extended supervision will be that the defendant follow all treatment recommendations, counselings, assessments deemed appropriate by the agent. He would be required to pay the costs of the action. There is no restitution that's been requested in this case. Costs to include a DNA surcharge, DNA sample. Those costs to be paid through the Department of Corrections. This sentence will take the defendant through his 20s, but is not considered to be a life sentence. There is a lot of living yet you have in front of you, sir. I hope that you take advantage of what opportunities are available within the prison system and utilize them to the best of your ability and to try to make a smooth transition into the community through extended supervision. I do have to advise you that this is a felony level offense. As a convicted felon, you would not be able to possess a firearm. Also, that you would not be able to vote until your civil liberties were restored. Also, because of the classification of this offense, you would not be statutorily eligible for the challenge incarceration program or the substance abuse program. I will provide you with a sheet entitled Written Explanation of Determinant Sentence that will explain in slightly greater detail the sentence structure imposed by the court. Finally, you have been convicted and sentenced today on this criminal offense. You do have 20 days in which to notify the court of any intent or desire to appeal. Mr. Malos will complete a form with that information for you. Ms. Piter, anything further from the state?
Your Honor, the state would ask that there be a no contact provision with the victim and the victim's family as part of the sentence.
I'll leave that to the agent. Mr. Malos, anything further?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Good luck to you, sir. Record closed.